Hi, and welcome back to Mingus on Tech. I'm Ken Mingus, Executive Editor at Computer World. I'm here with Senior Writer Lucas Mirian. We're here to talk about Microsoft Gig Jam, the short, fast life of Microsoft Gig Jam. Stick around. Okay, I have to admit, until you came across this story this week, Lucas, I had not really known much about Gig Jam, even though we wrote about it a year ago when Microsoft first rolled this out. And now we find out that sometime in September, it's going to go away. So I guess we should, so other people are going to be in the same boat I am. What's Gig Jam?
So it's a document sharing and co-editing application. It was actually very interesting. They piloted it, I think they launched it back in 2015. They've been piloting since then with beta users.
Yep.
And it turned out to be more of a learning tool for them. But what it allowed you to do was to upload documents into a gig, which was this sharing.
Like a shared document kind of thing.
Exactly. And you could redact information by crossing it out. So let's say that you have, I don't know, a Word file, and you want to redact a paragraph. You just cross it out. And if you want to share something in that file, you circle it. And then push it off into the gig form. And you already have a preset, whoever you're going to be sharing this with, you can add people as you go. So it was sort of unique in that way, in that it was real time. You could share the information. You could redact information in real time.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you think of collaboration tools, something like Slack or Microsoft Teams or Google Docs, you think of sort of this back and forth where you've got, files that get sent to somebody, they work on it, send it back, or maybe somebody, 2 or 3 people editing a file at the same time. But this seems like something that it's a collaboration tool, but it's not quite collaboration the way most people think of it. Right?
Yeah. They had this great, they did this great video, Microsoft did, trying to explain it. And they show a worker showing up at a business party. And he recognizes somebody from a different unit. And then they realize they're looking for a certain worker to fill a position. And he says, oh, I remember I saw a resume on LinkedIn. So he takes his cell phone, he pulls up the resume, says, well, she doesn't need to see this about the volunteer work and this, but does need to see this experience. So he circles that, pushes it off to her. She's standing there right in front of him. And she looks it over and she goes, oh, what other abilities does he have? And he goes, he's got some good volunteer experience. So he goes down and he circles the volunteer experience, he pushes it off. So it actually allows him to share just the information that he thinks she might or he might need in the document. It was kind of a very cool example of how you could use it.
So yeah, so unlike a Google Doc where you share the whole document, and maybe you've got people, I was thinking about this again for a distributed work team. You've got people in different places. You may have people at different levels of seniority in a company, and you don't want everybody to see everything in a document. This would allow you to share the portion of the document that needs to be worked on without sharing maybe sensitive corporate data that not everybody wants to see or needs to see.
That is exactly it. That was succinctly put. It was exactly what this allowed you to do. Unfortunately, I don't think Microsoft, and I don't know if this was purposeful, but they didn't market it real well, so people weren't really sure how to use
that was my point. I mean, we saw the story come out, or the story you did this week, that Microsoft is going to be sunsetting it in September, and I'm like, Gig Jam, what the what the hell is
Had anybody ever heard of it?
What did I miss out on? And it's interesting too that if I remember from your story, it allows you to pull information from various sources. I think Trello was one of the places you could pull some information from, and that so it's not like you're locked into one particular source.
It seemed like a really compelling application, and what they'll do with it, I don't know. I mean, you have a lot of other collaboration tools out there, but they didn't offer everything that this offered. You have I just have a list here: Slack, Microsoft Teams, Cisco Spark, HipChat. Those were messaging apps that didn't offer the document sharing. And then you had things like also Microsoft's Yammer, Jive, IBM Communications. Those allowed enterprise social networking to enable group projects, but they didn't allow the real-time sort of editing that this did. And then you have Microsoft SharePoint, which is document storing, management, and enterprise portal access to those documents. Again, not real time, like you were saying. You can share them. The edits can be made, can be sent back to others to look at. But it wasn't this kind of quick, here you go, here's what you need, here's what you don't need sort of thing, just by crossing out or circling.
It's interesting, you know, as you go through the list there, one of the things that seems fairly clear is that in some ways this app was competing with some of Microsoft's own apps, own software suite.
And I think that was sort of the point. I talked to a couple of analysts, and one thing they agreed on is, and Microsoft didn't have anything to say when I asked them. I said, you know, why did you kill this?
Yeah.
And they said, you know, only what we said in our blog post. And I gleaned something from that, and that they said this is going to help them to develop future products. And the analysts agreed what this is going to probably help Microsoft do in the future. Microsoft has a number of products for collaboration in Office 365. So you have Skype for Business, you have Yammer, you have SharePoint, that have crossover
different
capabilities.
Pieces, but it's like it has different pieces of collaboration spread among those different software.
So the lessons learned from this could help them collapse that into a single interface. And a good example of that is like unified communication vendors such as Cisco and its Spark team messaging app. You know, it's got soft phone, instant messaging, team messaging. Right now, those interfaces are all separate, may eventually be collapsed into one. In the same way, Microsoft Office could take all of these various collaboration tools and collapse them into a single interface to do all the things that a business user may
Well, you know, Microsoft loves to make things complicated at times, and I could just see trying to pull all of these things together. It is interesting, though, because there does seem to be a lot of energy around collaboration right now. I think because, you know, companies are doing more with remote workers. You've got companies that don't even have headquarters where everybody's distributed, and so there seems to be this sort of rush. I mean, every time you turn around, it looks like Slack is doing something, adding some feature to the Slack app. In fact, they've got their first Slack conference coming up in September. So it was sort of surprising to see Microsoft with this collaboration tool, again, especially with the sort of very modern UI, the idea of circling information and sending it or crossing it out and blocking it from other people who are going to be using it. To see Microsoft kind of shuttering this thing at this point, because it sounds like, you know, it's a hot market. I guess the point being that, you know, maybe this was a bit of an experiment. They wanted to see how it would work, how many people would actually use it. I'm not aware of anyone personally that's used GigJam, but and I haven't seen a lot of stories or insights that have been developed around it talking about how it could be used. So maybe this was just one grand experiment to see, you know,
It felt like that. It really did feel like that. It got a lot of press when it first came out, and then a couple of times when they added things like the iPhone interface to it. But then it sort of went quiet. And I think just behind the scenes, they were just piloting it with user groups to determine what its best application was, or in this case, you know, how it could offer a single interface for all these other tools that they already have.
Well, it's interesting because I was looking back at the story from last year when Microsoft was, you know, publicizing this a little bit, and Blair Frank Hanley over at IDG News Service, when he wrote about it, he specifically described it as kind of a wacky product.
Right, I remember that.
You know, and I mean, if you're rolling this thing out and it's seen as kind of a wacky product, it's probably not going to get the kind of traction Microsoft might have wanted. Well, clearly it didn't.
Great technology. What's the use case?
It's a bit wacky. Okay. All right. So, you know, if you're a GigJam user, be forewarned. GigJam is going away in a month or so. If for some reason you want to try this out, because the technology is kind of cool, especially around the UI, it's available online, I guess, for download through mid-September. Something like that.
I think it's like it has a 7-day use period. So when they finally do sunset it, the last people to upload it will be able to use it for a week.
They'll have a week to try it, and then it goes away. Of course, it's going away, so why would you want to try it? Unless you want to look at this as perhaps a future feature that may roll out with Office or some other Microsoft suite down the road. You know, it may be a bit of a sneak peek. All right, so that is the quick, short, fast life of GigJam. Thanks for the update, Lucas. I appreciate the insights. We'll see what comes of it. For now, that's a wrap.